I read in a previous interview that you said that your decision to pursue poetry came while you were a medical care provider. And in the interview you said you were deciding between continuing a career in the sciences or pursuing poetry. And obviously you've chosen the poetry direction. But I'm wondering if you can talk about how the sciences influence your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of my family background is in the sciences. My mother's a doctor, and growing up, we had bookcases full of medical texts. But also, one of the things that fascinated me about medical texts were the details of the body, the images of diagnoses, just the finite details. And I think that the idea or the attention to detail from the sciences directly translates into what I do in writing. I'm really interested in pattern. I'm really interested in the finite details of the everyday world when I write.
I'm just curious also, have you, do you know Leslie Adrian Miller at all, the poet? Have you read her book where she took the medical sort of autopsy diagrams and wrote a series of poems on them?
I've seen that book.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. That's just a side right anyway. But she was a mentor last year, actually. One of the other anthologies that you've co-edited used a series of, it had a series of poetic personas.
Yes.
And I'm wondering about your take about the first-person voice in poetry, particularly the persona or sort of fictional self,
right?
And whether that is sort of a danger for poets in that it's sort of misleading, or if it's something that allows a poem more freedom to explore sort of more avenues.
I can answer this via an anecdote through an observation of watching my son. And one of the things that he was doing when he was 3 was he was pretending that he was an animal called Fox. And it struck me while I was editing the anthology, he was pretending to be an animal. And it struck me as something that we as humans do. It is on the primal level that we pretend, that we imagine ourselves, and I think it's important for our own social and consciousness, our development as human beings, to be able to place ourselves in the mind or in the voice of somebody else, and that is, of course, the pathway to the idea of empathy, to be empathetic people, to be empathetic beings. I don't really concern myself or worry about, pretending to be somebody else. I think that, there is a healthy recognition of the other when we try on different selves. And in my own writing, I actually favor wearing masks and writing as different voices so that I can sort of probe or explore ideas or avenues that I may not, be familiar with on my own.
You speak about your son there as well, and I also heard you referenced that the most recent collection you have is sort of dedicated to your son, but you also said that a lot of your early writing was for and about the Asian American community. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how the difference in maybe writing something that is for and about a community versus writing something that's sort of more intimate and writing for and about a specific person.
Right. I think that early on in my writing life, I wrote with the community at my back, right? That I was consciously aware of a larger Asian American community who, really didn't have narratives of their own. And so I sought to write the narrative for the Asian American community. But as I grew as a writer, I realized that this is kind of an impossibility, that this is something that I as myself cannot do. And what I've chosen to do is to be the writer that I want to be as a model for future writers in the Asian American community. I think that I'm less inclined to write the Asian American poem intentionally, but I am writing the Asian American poem, regardless of my intent. Even if I'm writing a poem about raising a son, I'm still writing a poem about the Asian American experience, as unique as the Asian American experience is.
You also have a blog that you're a pretty frequent updater of, and there are some entries in there that have just a few asterisks and the word zap. And you've written that there are some writings that will live there for a day and disappear within 24 hours, and there's some that live in perpetuity. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what makes a piece of writing something that that you want to see endure in that sort of digital space, and what sort of disappears.
Well, when I write the blog and I'm composing poems on the blog, generally my intent is to erase all of them after they've lived a day, and the reason why I post them on the blog is to be accountable. That if I don't post them, they really don't exist, right? And sometimes what you observe as poems living on for a little bit longer is just me forgetting to update my blog. But other times, like if I've posted a poem and it's lived for a while, sometimes that's a poem that's been published and I've acknowledged the other presses. I'm finding that I'm publishing a lot more work digitally. I think that there's an immediacy to the digital medium that isn't, well, it's a different kind of cultural space than, say, the printed media. I still love the printed media, and I still like to see my work in journals and hardcover journals, or hard-bodied journals, those sorts of things. But I don't discriminate between the digital and the printed. I think that as long as I'm getting my work out there. Additionally, publication for me is actually part of my editorial process. That one of the things that prevents me from editing endlessly is putting my work out so that I surrender the process to other editors. So that's why sometimes I'll go to online journals, sometimes I'll go to print journals. I don't really discriminate between the two. I think that there's value in both entities.
And what would make you decide which medium to submit to?
I like the aesthetics of certain journals. If I like poems that certain online journals are putting out, I'll try to submit work to them. And the same is true for printed journals. If I like the work, I value the aesthetic choices that they make as a journal, and I find those aesthetic choices to be similar to the choices that I would make, then I would send those journals work, whether they be online or whether they be printed. So that sort of is what determines what goes where, what gets sent out to where.
And you're serving as a mentor in this year's Loft Mentor Series. And I know you haven't been to Minneapolis yet, but I'm wondering if you can just talk about what is the value of the role of mentor and mentee, and why somebody should maybe apply to the Loft Mentor Series.
Yeah, I think that it's important to have a community of writers, a community of artists who are doing things that are similar to what your interests are. Writing is a lonely space. Writing involves a lot of solitary time with you and the print, or you and the computer screen, or you and the written word. And I think there's a great value in finding peers, comrades, with whom you can share the joys as well as the pitfalls with. It's also great to talk about aesthetic choices. and to listen to what other people say about the choices that you make. I think that there's great value in understanding what people are seeing in your work, as well as what people see in their own work.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.